White opens with a solid pawn push, maintaining equality. The position is dynamically balanced. Black responds symmetrically, mirroring White's solid approach and keeping the balance. White develops a knight, slightly increasing their advantage. A standard developing move. Black develops a knight, maintaining a solid structure and equality. No significant changes. White's move 2 is a positional mistake, surrendering some of the initiative. Black solidifies their kingside fianchetto, accurately maintaining equality. White develops the bishop 2, a solid move that keeps the balance. Black mirrors the development, placing the bishop on a strong diagonal. White shores up the center with a solid, safe move. Black supports their central pawn structure with maintaining equality. White develops the bishop 2, a solid, active move. Black's knight maneuver 2 is a slight inaccuracy, allowing White to improve. White repositions the knight 2, a solid move that maintains control. Black solidifies the center with maintaining the dynamic balance. White advances the c-pawn 2, strengthening central control. A solid choice. Black develops the knight 2, reinforcing their central presence. White pushes the d-pawn 2, aiming for central space. Solid play. Black exchanges on. This slight inaccuracy concedes positional pressure. White recaptures with the knight, maintaining a slight positional edge. Black exchanges knights, simplifying but maintaining an equal structure. White recaptures with the bishop. This slight inaccuracy releases some pressure. Black pushes the e-pawn forward, a solid positional move. White develops the bishop 2, maintaining a balanced position. Black's knight 2 is a mistake, hindering piece coordination and yielding advantage. White repositions the knight 2, solidifying their position. Black castles kingside, a necessary move for king safety. White castles kingside, a slight inaccuracy, but king safety is achieved. Black develops the bishop 2, a solid defensive stance. White centralizes the queen 2. A slight inaccuracy in development. Black moves the queen 2, a slight inaccuracy that allows White more initiative. White activates a rook 2, applying pressure along the open file. Black challenges the center with a solid attempt to gain space. White expands on the queenside with solidifying central control. Black exchanges pawns on. This slight inaccuracy concedes a stronger pawn center. White advances the knight 2, a solid move that reinforces the center. Black maneuvers the knight 2, a solid attempt to improve piece activity. White captures the knight on, consolidating a significant positional advantage. Black exchanges knights. This mistake significantly weakens their position, giving White a clear advantage. White recaptures with the queen, solidifying control and maintaining the clear advantage. Black's move 2 is a significant mistake, allowing White to gain even more ground. White activates the rook 2, a solid move increasing pressure. Black repositions the rook 2, a solid defensive measure. White centralizes the other rook 2, a solid move to coordinate forces. Black places the rook on. This slight inaccuracy doesn't prevent White's dominance. White strengthens queenside control with a solid positional maneuver. Black supports the queenside pawn structure with a solid defensive choice. White develops the knight 2, solidifying their central control. Black's queen 2 is a mistake, allowing White a decisive positional advantage. White places the bishop on, a solid move asserting dominance. Black moves the king 2, a solid but passive defensive maneuver. White captures the pawn on, a solid move that increases the advantage. Black recaptures with the queen, solidifying their pawn structure. White activates the rook to, a solid maneuver to control the open file. Black defends with the rook to, a solid positional choice. White consolidates on the d-file with the rook, a solid placement. Black repositions the rook to, a solid defensive effort. White centralizes the knight to, a solid move increasing pressure. Black develops the bishop to, a solid, if passive, move. White brings the rook to, a solid move creating threats. Black centralizes the queen to, a solid attempt to contest. White repositions the rook to, a solid, powerful move. Black develops the bishop to. This slight inaccuracy allows white to gain material. White captures the pawn on with the knight, a decisive material gain. Black recaptures with the bishop, a solid response to white's gain. White recaptures with the rook, maintaining the decisive material advantage. Black's rook to is a severe blunder, allowing white to win material. White captures the pawn on with the queen, a solid, winning move. Black captures the pawn on. This slight inaccuracy doesn't change the outcome. White delivers check with the rook to, a solid forcing move. Black blocks with the rook to, a solid defensive response. White exchanges rooks, simplifying into a winning endgame. A solid move. Black recaptures the rook, a solid continuation in the endgame. White moves the rook to, a solid move that dominates the 8th rank. Black repositions the rook to, a solid defensive attempt. White centralizes the queen to, a solid move increasing pressure. Black pushes the pawn to, a solid but insufficient move. White delivers check with the queen to, a solid, winning continuation. Black moves the king to, a solid, active defense. White delivers check with the rook to, a solid checkmating threat. Black moves the king to, a solid attempt to evade. White captures the pawn with the queen, a solid move ending the game. Black centralizes the queen to, a solid attempt to survive. White repositions the rook to. This mistake allows black a brief respite. Black checks with the queen to. This mistake is futile against white's dominance. White moves the king to, a solid, safe position. Black moves the queen to, a solid defensive stance. White checks with the rook to. This mistake offers a slight tempo loss. Black moves the king to, a slight inaccuracy, but the game is lost. White centralizes the queen to, a slight inaccuracy but still crushing. Black centralizes the queen to, a solid, final defensive effort. White repositions the queen to, a solid continuation of the attack. Black pushes the pawn to, a solid attempt to create counterplay. White moves the rook to, a slight inaccuracy that doesn't affect the result. Black moves the queen to. This slight inaccuracy allows white to press on. White centralizes the queen to, a solid move reinforcing the attack. Black repositions the rook to, a solid defensive setup. White activates the rook to, a solid move increasing the pressure. Black moves the queen to. This slight inaccuracy allows white to win. White centralizes the queen to, a solid move leading to victory. Black's move to is a mistake, allowing white to force a swift conclusion. White delivers check with the queen to, a solid move maintaining the advantage. Black centralizes the queen to, a solid defensive attempt. White activates the rook to, a solid move sealing the victory. Black's queen to is a severe blunder, ending the game.